Welcome back. Today we'll address the fifth law of consistency. The laws of consistency being practices that will reduce the number of errors you make in baseline rallies. But before I begin, let me address this question. I am up to 5 laws, so you may be wondering just how many laws of consistency are there? An understandable question. And I will have an answer for you at the end of this presentation. The fifth law of consistency is hit cross court most of the time. This is perhaps the easiest of the consistency laws to understand and to execute. The reasons are obvious, and you're almost certainly familiar with them. First, you're hitting over the lowest part of that ever bothersome, utterly infuriating obstacle that tennis's insidious originators put right across the middle of the court. Second, you're hitting along the longest path that the court offers, diagonally towards the far corner. Both of these factors significantly reduce the chance of error. The singles court is 78 feet long and 27 feet wide. Calling upon Pythagoras' trusty theorem, remember that one from junior high school? In any event, the distance from one corner of the singles court to the diagonally opposite corner of the singles court is 82.5 feet, or if you're a real stickler, 82.52 feet. That affords you a smidgen more than 4.5 extra feet to hit at. But let's get real here. How often do you actually hit, that is to say, make contact with the ball at the actual corner of the singles court? The answer is very, very rarely. So I would like to do 2 things. First, I want to consider measurements more realistic than the simple fact that the diagonal across the singles court is 82.5 feet from corner to corner. These will be measurements that more accurately describe the distances you confront and can take advantage of when you are actually playing. Second, I want to assess how these distances change as you hit from different points in baseline rallies. So, let's assume you're hitting from 2 feet behind the baseline, right about there. Yes, of course, you'll hit a lot of shots from farther back, not too much farther, I hope, and others from within that distance. But for instructional purposes, I think 2 feet will suffice. Let's begin by putting you way over to one side, directly behind one of the single sidelines. If you hit straight ahead down the line, you have 80 feet to hit at. That's the 78-foot length of the court, plus the 2 feet behind the baseline at which your racket strikes the ball. If you go to the diagonally opposite corner, that way, then you have 84 feet 5 inches to hit at, essentially an extra 4 feet 5 inches. And of course, there's another reason you want to go cross court from this position, and that is that when you go over to one side of the court and you hit down the line, your opponent has the golden opportunity of hitting cross court at an angle to a court that is virtually entirely open and undefended, precisely because you're at the outermost extreme of the court and have hit down the line. Now consider what happens as you get farther from the single sideline and closer to the center of the baseline. For example, if your racket contacts the ball at 2 feet behind the baseline and halfway between the imaginary extensions of the center service line and the singles sideline, that is 6 3/4 feet from the imaginary extensions of both lines. The distance to the diagonally opposite corner of the singles court is 82.5 feet, or 82.52 feet for you sticklers. Of course, if you hit straight ahead from this point, you have the same 80 feet to hit at as you did when you were all the way to the side of the court. So, hitting from this position, cross court towards the opposite corner affords you 2.5 feet of extra hitting room. Now let's move you directly behind the baseline center mark. Technically, from this position, there is no cross court since you're not hitting across the center of the court. Rather, you're hitting from the court's imaginary center line, extended 2 feet behind the baseline, either straight ahead or off to one side or the other. And geometrically, it makes no difference whether you hit to the left or to the right. But the principle is the same. To give yourself more length of court to hit at and still keep the ball in bounds, you should hit diagonally towards one or the other corner on the opposite side of the court rather than straight ahead. Thus, the distance from 2 feet behind the center court to either corner of the singles court on the opposite side of the net is, rounded off just a bit, 81.13 feet. That is 1 foot, 1.5 inches more distance to hit at than if you hit straight ahead. All three of these extra distances, 4 feet 5 inches, 2 feet 6 inches, and 1 foot 1.5 inches, are considerable. Even the 1 foot 1.5 inches of extra hitting room you get when you hit from 2 feet behind the center of the baseline. Just think of all the balls you've called out on your opponents during baseline rallies because the ball went over the baseline. A lot, a whole lot, landed within a mere foot of the baseline. Had your opponent hit a bit more diagonally, those shots would have landed in. The same, of course, is true of your shots. There are certainly exceptions to this law. There will be times during baseline rallies when you want to hit down the line rather than cross court. You should go down the line, if only to mix things up a bit and keep your opponent guessing. Or, if your opponent's backhand is weak and hitting down the line is the way to take advantage of that weakness, by all means go down the line more frequently. And then there are the instances when one player is a righty and the other is a lefty, a circumstance confronted by you lefties almost all the time. In that case, hitting cross-court means that each player is hitting cross-court forehands to the other's, probably weaker, backhand. That being so, you may want to hit your backhands down the line more frequently so that they go to your opponent's backhand and you don't keep getting pounded by his or her forehand. Of course, your opponent may adopt the same strategy, and you'll find yourself in a war of backhands. If that makes you uncomfortable, go to the cross-court strategy, or at least mix things up more. The point is, you have to weigh the pluses and minuses. Make sure the advantages of going down the line outweigh the increased risk of error that comes with hitting over the higher part of the net and towards the shorter length of the court. Finally, it's worth noting something that may seem to contradict much of what I've said to this point. When you are hitting from the baseline, cross court towards the corners of your opponent's court, the only time the ball will cross the net at its exact center, where the net is at its lowest height, 3 feet, is when you strike the ball from the corner of your court and hit towards the diagonally opposite corner of your opponent's court. As you move from the corner towards the center of the baseline, hitting cross court to the diagonally opposite corner of your opponent's court, the net directly in front of you is getting lower, while your cross court shots are no longer going over the net at its lowest point. Instead, your cross court shots are going over the net progressively further towards the sideline and progressively further away from the net's center. In other words, you are hitting over the net where it is getting progressively higher. This means that the chances your straight ahead shots will clear the net are increasing, while the chances your cross court shots will clear the net are decreasing. In fact, when you hit from directly behind the center of the baseline, it is your straight ahead shot that goes over the lowest part of the net and thus has the greatest chance of clearing it, while your shots angled to the corners go over the net to one or the other side of center, where the net is higher, thus decreasing the chance of clearing the net. But this is only an apparition of a problem, because your straight ahead shots are still affording you only the shortest length of court to hit to, thereby increasing the likelihood of hitting long. And even more importantly, by now you, of course, are adhering to the second law of consistency, aren't you? You know, the law that has you clearing the net by a lot and thereby altogether avoiding this problem. That brings me to the end of the laws of consistency. Yes, there are other things you can do to increase baseline consistency, things that might also be labeled laws, and there are other quite different takes on consistency, such as the one you'll find in the link below to a video from 1 Minute Tennis. I've also put a link there to a video by Mikey Babel that takes much the same approach I've taken in this fifth law video, and a link to a top tennis training video which offers a general overview of baseline consistency. What I've tried to do is to identify the most important elements of baseline consistency, the ones I think will have the greatest impact on consistency without, as I said in the first video of this series, the need to change your strokes. Moreover, there is a virtue in keeping the list short enough so as to be easily recalled and implemented. I hope I've been of some help to you. In the next video, I'll give you some games and drills that will aid you in working on baseline consistency, and which may offer you a little fun while you're doing it. If you've liked this video, please click the like button below. And if you've seen and liked enough of the Crosscourt Rabbit offerings to merit it, please also hit the subscribe button. In any event, keep playing the greatest of all games. I'm David Popeil, and I'll see you next time.